Hello. It's always a little bit of a funny thing to introduce somebody you've been working with for a long time in front of a group of people who may or may not know them. But this morning as I was walking along the lake, looking out at the water and the mountains and the trees and the rocks and the sky here, I had a really strong experience of this place and Michael DeLeo being very similar. That makes sense because he's been coming here for a long time, since he was a child. I first met Michael DeLeo in 2007 when he was teaching an astronomy class while I was in my eurythmy training, and he had us move in space the relationships between the planets in our solar system. And this was the first time I had ever done something like this, and being someone who learns by doing and by moving, this was actually very informative for me. And what I learned about Michael then and continue to experience in him is that he asks for people to take up what is often said, that all education, all adult education is self-education. So I think that this is something that Michael really asks of us. Michael, I could tell you a lot about Michael and his 17 patents he had as an engineer and traveling around the world and teaching and starting Waldorf schools and teaching in Waldorf schools internationally, but you can look on his website or on the internet for that. But what I really want to tell you about Michael is that he is a real human becoming, and I feel that he is, in the sense of the word becoming, constantly striving to find the relationships between human beings and the earth and the cosmos and each other, and most of all, that we have this great responsibility. And this is something that he supports in the people around him and also really strives for in himself. So please help me to welcome Michael DeLeo.
So I'm not used to being somebody who has to stand here. I'm used to moving, and we'll do what we can to be here so you can hear me. Certain talks can only be given at certain places and certain times, and the time and place for this one's quite interesting. So this morning in my workshop, I asked people to look out to the east. Are you aware you're within 1 mile of an old gold mine? Nobody knows it's there. But a woman one day dropped a series of USGS texts on my desk. Said, here, these might be useful for the student. I opened up the index. What am I going to learn from this? But when I saw the word gold mine, I thought that was interesting. It's on state land. If it was summer, I would take you there. They will tell you it's something else. A single 9th grader confirmed in their finding. We sit within a mile of a gold mine. If you look to the south and look on the map, you find a place called Diamond Island. If you were to swim in the water, the shallows around the island, there still remains, even though it's been looked at for years, some of the purest Herkimer diamonds, which is some of the hardest and purest quartz you can find in the world. If you go to the west of here, you'll come to the Barton Garnet Mine. This is the state gem of New York State. This crystalline mineral full of iron, which you'll see has something to do with this place. And now my favorite, but not really, I'm very happy that this is happening in November, because if you stand out on the shore and look to the north, you'll see Tongue Mountain. It is the one place in New York State that you'll find the rattlesnake. The story goes, I don't know if it's true, that somebody sold this to GE as a place for their executives to get away. I don't know if it's true, but there's something interesting about that story. It is now owned by the state, and you can go there in the summer and hear and see the snakes, as there's quite a few. But the place I wanted to talk to you a little bit about is further inland into the Adirondacks, because you're only on the edge. And if you really want to experience it, you have to go to the heart. And the heart of the Adirondacks has had more to do with what you hold dear than you're aware of. At the end of the Civil War, a New York Times reporter went to the Adirondacks and spent a short period of time on 2 lakes and was really moved by the power that he experienced at these lakes, the power of nature, and wrote an article in which he talked about the importance of the human being connected back to the natural world. This is the 1860s. The reporter's name was Street. This area later became the first part of a private reserve that birthed the Adirondack State Park before the national parks even existed. And this place became the model for land preservation, but in an interesting way. There's 6 million acres in the Adirondack State Park. The only park in the lower 48 larger is Yellowstone. But half of it's public and half of it's private. So rather than forbidding human action, for almost 150 years, the relationship between preserving nature and helping human beings find a right relationship, whether it be recreational, whether it be small farming, whether it be logging. This has been practiced here and sorted out and continues to be sorted out for 150 years. But that particular set of lakes, if you begin to understand geological, I'm going to use the word mandalas for lack of a better word, there's a certain power in this place that I'm talking about. It's in King Valley, New York, and if you look at the National Geographic story on the Adirondacks, the place where you find the fold-out page that opens up from the past is taken from a place called Indian Head. And the story is, there was a single medicine man who used to live at the edge of this lake. This lake is in the shape of a crescent moon, and the waters are black. Maybe you notice the water here is darker than the water you used to. And that will come in shortly too. This lake is now in a private reserve. You can walk to the lake. You can't swim there. You can't camp. You can't fish. You can't boat. You can't spend the night. But if you want to experience a place where the trees have never been cut, I suggest you try this place. One of the only places on the East Coast that you can find this. Because in fact, the Adirondack Park was created partially because the people in New York City were trying to understand why the water ran brown in the Hudson River. And in fact, it was because they had clear-cut, essentially, the entire Adirondack Park, but for these few sections. I live within a stone's throw, and I mean a stone's throw, from my porch, of state wilderness land. This place is protected. You can't do anything on that land that didn't exist in the 1870s when this park was created. You can walk, you can camp, you can fish, you can hunt, you cannot take an ATV. And even if it's a matter of life and death, they're not allowed to bring a snowmobile back there to pull you out. But a group of local people who are committed to it will go find you, and have pulled many people out. The kind of little gray area around the airspace, they can hover a helicopter and lower a litter for you, but they can't land it. What's interesting about this park also is the rock, the anorthosite. This is amongst the second oldest rock on the face of the earth. And it is similar in composition to the white of the moon. So here we have this crescent moon lake surrounded by rock from the highlands of the moon. And during the Apollo missions, before Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin and Collins were to make this first mission to the moon, they actually took a hike up next to Indian Head. There's a photo of them, because this is what you'll experience. This was not a place that, as far as I've been told by Mohawk elders, you lived year-round. It was a place you went and hunted, a place you would go in the summer, but not in the winter. And as I was told by one, it was considered too intense a place because of the ice giants. But, as one elder told me, they could be defeated by a hickory war club. You would have to live into hickory to understand perhaps what's being pointed to there. When I think of the moon, I think of the metal silver. I'll tell you what it means to me. Silver is a very interesting material. What color does it have? It shows the color around it. If you make a form out of it and strike it, it will continue to vibrate for an extremely long period of time. You place it into a cup of hot tea, you're likely to burn your fingers. You connect an electrical imbalance to it, it will take it on with no resistance. The essence of silver is, it has no essence. It is a true reflection of its surroundings. And in many ways, I think there's something demanded of the people if you want to live here. You know, in this 6 million acre park, there are essentially no spiritual institutions. I know of some people who tried to create one, but the discord between them resulted in it being unsuccessful. This is a place that requires a certain honesty, but has a certain power. A friend of mine from Germany came once. I took him to this moon lake. Beyond it, by the way, is the lake of the sun. You're not allowed there. There's only 12 families that own a place there, and that's reserved for them. The power of this place, not only did the astronauts visit it just before the first moon landing, the decision to drop the first atomic bomb was also made from this place. A small group of people. The Secretary of War was a member of the group at that time. For the astrology people, both of these events, the first atomic bomb drop and the mission to the moon, both occurred on July 16th. You can spend a little time looking at that and find what that is in the old calendar. So I'm trying to suggest to you this is a place of power. The water is black, but if you get to the water where it's shallow and see the sun shine through it, you'll see it become the most beautiful gold. This connection to place this landscape that we live in, this kind of foundational earth, is part of 3 different systems that have been described in many different ways. And I'd like for a moment to shift to a Chinese system. I made a little joke in my workshop this morning. I had an opportunity to go to the Temple of Heaven in Beijing and described how much fun I had writing an email to my mother. Hey, I'm going to the Temple of Heaven. Don't know if I'll come back. At least you know where I went. But in this Temple of Heaven, you find 3 animals personified over and over and over. 3 animals, 3 temples, 3 of everything. A lion, a phoenix, and a dragon. You come to this first temple. There's no inside, completely outside. It's white. It's solid stone. Here's the lion. This earth foundation upon which we find ourselves, but through certain actions that you would do there, it would determine whether or not you were listening carefully enough to what was around you. You would actually walk to the center of this completely open structure with nothing around you for miles. Meters. No, not probably miles. 400 meters. You would clap your hands, and if you did so in the right place and listen carefully, you'll hear a perfect echo in your ears, not with your ears, inside. And when we truly make a connection to the landscape, this is not something that you just speak of as a number of facts, but it becomes something that you yourself become. And those of you who've been farming the same land for a while, you know that this is true. You start to become the earth, the water, and the landscape that you were at. I find it quite interesting that as I travel around the United States and look at different people in different places, I do find often that the people who have come later begin to resemble the indigenous people who were there before. Because it's not just the bloodline that's being expressed. It's actually your being in that place. If you look at the Temple of Heaven, this figure of the lion, you'll find this figure claws on the earth, almost immovable. And you'll see this fierceness, this groundedness. Because unless you have this fierceness and groundedness, you're not actually prepared for the next stage. The phoenix comes next. And what you find is you find this bird with a feather. This isn't as grounded as the lion. But what's interesting is the feather has less movement than the mane of the lion. You begin to already see, while there's an outward mobility, the subtlest residue of a little bit of hardening. And then you come to this last level and you find this dragon. The phoenix, by the way, red. The dragon blue. And this beautiful, moving form, this ever sinuous aspect of the dragon as a reflection of the mane of the lion. And what do you find on the exterior of the dragon? Scales. That even the spirit reflects the earth and is mediated by this phoenix in between. Understanding the difference between this phoenix and the dragon, I think, is essential at this time. Because the phoenix is this bird which goes from earth to heaven, and back to earth, and back to heaven. But each time it returns to the earth, it gives itself over completely. Completely. And it makes me think of silver. Of silver being a reflection of its surroundings. And this phoenix moment really, really is asking, how much flexibility, how much change of soul quality do you have? Sometimes I find it's easiest to look at it through the scientific lens, sometimes through the poetic lens. And so this poem came before I knew of the figure of the phoenix, but I recognized it was actually an expression of this. Its title, Intuition and Innovation, but the subtitle, The New Resurrection. The greatest obstacle to intuition is what you already know. That which limits innovation is what you've already done. To see with new eyes requires a death and a rebirth. A death to every aspect of who you are. Because who you think you are and what you think the world is exactly what holds you back. The ancient ones understood the importance of death and its true transformative nature. Carefully guided, it became the vehicle for a new rebirth. Today, our fixed thoughts and rationalizations, our sentimental desires to relive what we have already lived becomes the new death. Now, the awakening comes not from a guide who raises us from the dead, but instead from our own striving to live anew, truly new, a rebirth into the same world, only this time it's more alive, and finally, so are you. This figure of the phoenix is not something we take on easily. It requires us to change constantly. And the fact that I'm even standing here reciting a poem I've written myself and talking about human-to-human interaction, that's a long way from an engineer who sought the perfection of the spirit in the earthly matter. There are rules and relationships in this world that we can rely upon. The question is, what will you do with it? What will each of us do with it? Because the level of freedom that's accorded to us is beyond our wildest imagination. Now we have to say a little something about this blue dragon. This idea of a truth, true beyond you, is not something easily understood at this time. Experience through you the true beyond you. This is something that I find very, very important in understanding why someone's art speaks to me and someone else's does not. I can see in many artists this capacity of an expression of their experience. But what is the art that truly grabs us? What is the music that grabs generations, spans the essence of time? What are the insights that we find live for years, centuries, and in many cases, the wisdom of the ancients, millennia? These are the aspects experienced through an individual, but true beyond you. They're not yours. They're not mine. But they are something that we can experience when we're willing